Prince Harry has launched an extraordinary attack on the Daily Mail newspaper following his train wreck trip to Australia. Now, we know that their fake royal tour down under was a horrible mess. They didn't make as much money as they wanted because the tickets for both of their events just didn't sell. The Australian public shrugged their shoulders and ignored the couple, which is a nightmare for Harry and Meghan. The media and politicians were furious at the cost of security for the Australian taxpayer. Meghan tried to claim that she's the most trolled woman in the world, when the fact is that she trolls everyone else. And Prince Harry hammered the final nail in the coffin of his relationship with his father, the King, by slamming Charles's parenting skills.
Harry's reaction to the Australian tour coverage didn't come across like someone celebrating a smooth, successful rollout. It felt more like someone who saw reports from Daily Mail, Sky News Australia, and Daily Mirror, and wasn't happy with how it all landed. Instead of directly challenging the details being reported, the response shifted toward pushing back on the outlets themselves. A formal complaint, shared through The Guardian's Australian arm, claimed that the Daily Mail broke an embargo by publishing details about the couple's movements days before they even arrived in Melbourne. That included locations, background notes, and even a prepared Q&A. Sky News Australia pushed back quickly, saying no embargo was broken and that everything reported was already available publicly. The Daily Mirror was also named in the complaint, but without any extra specifics, which made the whole situation feel even more unclear. Here's where things get interesting. The couple's team had already shared detailed plans with selected media outlets ahead of the tour, giving them early access under embargo conditions. That system is meant to control when and how stories go live, allowing for more polished, favourable coverage at a set time.
Australian website is said to have broken an embargo by publishing details of the couple's movements 5 days before they arrived in Melbourne. Now, an embargo, if you don't know, is when the press say, here's a piece of information, but you're not allowed to publish it until this date.
But once journalists accept that material, they're also agreeing to follow the timing set by the team behind it. So when the Daily Mail's Australian branch published similar details early, the big question became, did they break the rules, or did they simply get the same information through their own reporting? That's a huge difference. If the information was already out there, then publishing it isn't a violation. It's just standard journalism covering public events. That's exactly what Sky News Australia suggested. And if that's the case, then labeling the reporting as aggressive starts to look like a stretch, because aggressive describes behavior, not the basic act of reporting where public figures are and what they're doing in public spaces. The claim that this kind of reporting created a safety issue, forced schedule changes, and justified a formal complaint paints a very specific picture. It suggests a desire for full control over how public appearances are covered, almost like trying to apply private event rules to fully public situations. But that's not how media coverage usually works. When public figures attend events in open, public settings,
Daily Mail's reportedly aggressive handling of Prince Harry and Meghan's Australian trip has, according to sources who spoke to The Guardian, irreparably damaged the Sussexes' willingness to brief the press ahead of future visits. How will the press survive not receiving those precious press releases from Harry and Meghan?
Coverage doesn't depend on approval, it happens because it's newsworthy. And here's the twist. The tour itself followed a familiar high-visibility playbook: hospital visits, appearances at major landmarks, moments designed to draw attention and generate headlines. After creating that level of exposure, the frustration seemed to shift toward how much coverage actually happened and how closely it followed the team's preferred structure. That tension reveals a bigger pattern. On one side, there's a clear interest in the kind of exposure that builds visibility and long-term value. On the other, there's a strong push to control the tone.
The Daily Mail dared to reveal what the couple would be up to when they were in Australia. You heard me right. They dared to do some journalism and to report on the activities of this fame-hungry couple.
timing, and narrative of that exposure. Even the choice of platform added another layer. The complaint being shared through The Guardian stood out to many observers, especially given its perceived alignment in past coverage. It created a situation where one outlet became the channel for responding to others, adding another dimension to an already complicated media dynamic. Meanwhile, a separate legal case involving Mr. Justice Nicklin has added even more attention to the broader media relationship. Prince Harry is among those bringing claims against associated newspapers, with allegations related to past reporting practices. The publisher has strongly denied those claims, and the outcome is still being closely watched.
The journalism they do is perfectly good, but their reporting on Harry and Meghan is horrible. And the reason why is because The Guardian newspaper is the in-house newsletter.
All of this together shows just how complex the relationship between public figures and the media can get. When visibility, control, and public interest collide, every detail, what's shared, when it's shared, and how it's reported can quickly turn into a much bigger story. The trial reached a turning point in its final phase, when an email linked to Charlotte Griffith surfaced and appeared to conflict with parts of Harry's earlier sworn testimony. That moment shifted attention fast, because once evidence like that enters the record, it doesn't just sit quietly, it raises bigger questions about consistency and credibility. Now, everything depends on the final verdict. When that decision lands, it will shape whether this entire legal effort against the Daily Mail was worth the cost, not just financially, but in terms of public image and the strength of the evidence presented along the way. And the financial side is no small detail.
His husband, David Furnish, actors Sadie Frost and Elizabeth Hurley, against the publishers of the Daily Mail and Mail on Sunday, has concluded in London. Now, the allegations in that case include phone hacking, landline tapping, and the bugging of celebrity homes, all denied by the publisher.
Legal battles at this level can get extremely expensive, especially if the outcome doesn't go your way. Under certain legal mechanisms, costs can climb far beyond any potential payout. While some claimants, like Elton John, are widely believed to have the resources to handle that kind of hit, the situation for Prince Harry looks a bit more complicated right now. There's been ongoing talk about shifting income streams, changing deal structures, and mixed results from recent projects. That means a major financial setback wouldn't just be a headline, it could have real impact. At the same time, commentary from figures like Sarah Louise Robertson has added another layer to how the Australian tour is being viewed.
One of those moaning minis. I think that's just his nature. He just loves to moan. He's a victim elder. That's what I think.
Well, I think that's right. And I suspect he's had too much therapy. He spent too long in California. And it's the view of Tom Bauer, whose brilliant new book about the Sussexes' betrayal is out now, who suggests that Meghan leveraged the idea of victimhood to get Harry out of the royal family in the first place. Meghan said to Harry, "They're treating you terribly. You're the victim."
Her perspective draws on industry experience, and she pointed to a pattern that connects past and present. According to that view, the 2018 tour didn't meet expectations behind the scenes, partly because it followed traditional royal rules: no direct payment and no personal gain from gifts. Fast forward to 2026, and the structure looks very different. The public-facing events are still there, but now they sit alongside commercial elements that create value in new ways. That shift changes how everything is interpreted. What used to be purely service-based appearances now exist within a broader setup that includes branding, partnerships.
You never heard his mother, Princess Diana, go on like that, did you, Mark? No. She just knew, she just had instant empathy and understood how hard people had it. And that was why she introduced Harry and William, which William's, really took up the cause of helping homelessness in the UK. And William doesn't sit and denigrate his childhood or go on about how hard he's had it, the Prince of Wales, because he knows that would sound ludicrous and it would make people hate the royal family.
And monetized opportunities. Robertson also described a broader pattern in Harry's public messaging over the years, not as an attack, but as an observation, one that focuses on recurring themes in his interviews and speeches. Topics like personal struggle, institutional pressure, and emotional impact come up again and again, forming a consistent narrative style. Those experiences are real, and they matter. But the way they're presented, especially in structured, paid speaking environments, has raised questions among some observers about where the line sits between personal expression and public positioning. The comparison to Diana, Princess of Wales, comes up often in that context. She was known for focusing attention outward, connecting directly with people facing real challenges. The contrast being discussed here isn't about dismissing anyone's experience. It's about how empathy is expressed and where the spotlight is placed.
I think she's really arrived, because what she's worked out is with the algorithms on the internet, when people search, they can't be bothered with putting in Duchess of Sussex. So it's Meghan Markle or just Meghan. And this is how astute Meghan is in that way. She's crafty, Mark.
Another detail that stood out during the tour was branding. The move toward using Meghan as a standalone identity reflects a very modern approach, simple, searchable, and easy to recognize across platforms. It's a strategy used by many high-profile figures aiming for strong digital visibility. But public response doesn't always match branding goals. A poll by Roy Morgan suggested that a large majority of Australians who followed the tour didn't come away with a more positive view. That creates a gap between how something is positioned and how it's actually received. There's also a noticeable shift in how the couple's joint and individual projects are structured. Meghan's ventures, from lifestyle branding to event-driven appearances, are increasingly standing on their own. Harry's contributions, like speaking engagements, are still present, but they operate differently and don't always generate the same level of traction. That difference became especially visible during the Australian tour. On one side, there were multiple commercial touchpoints tied to Meghan's brand. On the other, Harry's mental health-focused appearance didn't reach the same level of audience response. All of this highlights a growing imbalance in how their public roles are evolving. The shared identity still carries recognition, but behind the scenes, the paths are starting to separate and the results are becoming harder to ignore. The Sussex.com domain, the candle products tied to the children's royal titles, the lifestyle platform, the As Ever brand, the retreat events, the speaking circuit, all of it points to one thing: a structured commercial operation built on the Sussex identity, while slowly separating the individual paths behind it. That's where the imbalance starts to show. Prince Harry isn't building a standalone commercial identity outside of that shared brand.
She's got her platform, she's got what she's needed, and now this is about cashing in, and that's what we're doing. Do you know, Mark, she's been flogging off the clothes she's been wearing.
I know.
So when she went to meet these victims of the Bondi Beach attack,
his public value is still closely tied to the institutional recognition that comes with the Sussex name. Meanwhile, Meghan Markle is clearly moving in a different direction, building something that can stand on its own, even if that institutional connection fades over time. And that difference matters, because while one side is expanding into independent branding, the other remains heavily linked to a title-based identity. That creates a dynamic where one path looks flexible and the other looks far more dependent on how long that shared recognition holds strong. Observers have been pointing this out for a while. The idea that Meghan is developing a long-term strategy that can continue even if the Sussex label loses momentum, while Harry's public positioning doesn't show the same level of independence. When you look at it closely, the contrast is hard to ignore. Meghan has projects, platforms, and branding that can continue in different forms. Harry's visibility, on the other hand, still revolves around the role and recognition tied to that shared identity. This is where media coverage becomes a key factor. Outlets like the Daily Mail and Sky News Australia have been highlighting these patterns, bringing attention to how the structure actually works behind the scenes. The pushback against that coverage, labeling it as aggressive or raising concerns about reporting details, can be seen as an attempt to shift focus away from the underlying message. Because the real story isn't just about what was reported, it's about what those reports reveal. Data points like the Roy Morgan poll results, the quieter crowd moments, the short duration of certain events, and the structured nature of the retreat all form part of a broader picture. These aren't isolated claims, they're observable outcomes from the tour itself. And reporting those outcomes? That's standard journalism. It doesn't rely on approval or controlled timing, it reflects what actually happened in public view.
Also alleged that the Daily Mail followed the advanced security team from the airport and reported on its movements, raising fears that Harry and Meghan's safety had been put at risk. Here we go, folks. This is Harry and Meghan bingo, isn't it? Aggressive reporting and now safety.
The response from the Sussex team suggests a growing divide in how media relationships are handled. Outlets that don't align with the preferred narrative are pushed out of the inner circle, while others continue to receive access and early briefings. That's not just tension, it's a shift in strategy. Access becomes selective, and the flow of information starts depending on how coverage is framed. When embargoed briefings are restricted to certain outlets, it creates a controlled environment where timing and tone can be managed more tightly. But the challenge is, not every outlet depends on that access. Major platforms will still report, with or without cooperation. And in a media landscape as active as the UK, that becomes even more significant. The Daily Mail remains one of the most widely read English-language outlets globally. Coverage isn't going to pause just because access changes. The same applies to networks connected to Sky News, which operate across multiple regions. So, what happens next? That's where things get interesting. As public appearances move into more intense media environments, different versions of the same story will exist side by side, one shaped by controlled messaging, the other by independent reporting. And when both are available to the public at the same time, the audience decides what they believe. The Australian tour created a public record that speaks for itself, and no amount of back and forth is likely to change that. Not the embargo complaint, not coverage through The Guardian, and not even claims about a damaged relationship with the press. When future appearances roll around, especially heading into the British summer, everything will be measured against that same record again. Because here's the key point. The real pressure isn't coming from the media relationship, it's coming from what people already saw and how they interpreted it. Public records don't shift based on timing agreements or internal disputes. Understanding how embargo systems work makes this even clearer. An embargo is essentially a tool used to manage how stories are released. Selected outlets get early information, agree to hold it, and then publish at a set time. In return, they get access and a working relationship going forward. That creates a very specific environment. Outlets inside that system benefit from early access, while also maintaining a connection they don't want to lose. It's a balance between reporting and relationship management. So, when something disrupts that system, like early publication of similar information, it doesn't just affect one story, it affects the structure itself. That's why the response becomes so strong. It's not only about timing, it's about control over how narratives are shaped and delivered. In this case, reporting from outlets like the Daily Mail appeared to step outside that structure. Whether the information came from independent sourcing or not, the result was the same. The controlled rollout didn't go as planned. The reaction that followed framed the situation in serious terms. Claims about aggressive reporting, concerns about safety, and statements about long-term damage to media relationships all became part of the narrative. That kind of framing naturally draws attention and shapes how the situation is perceived. One of the more serious points raised involved claims about following security movements during arrival. That's a strong allegation because it suggests interference with protective planning. But when placed in context, it raises questions. The tour itself involved public arrivals, visible movements, and extensive coverage at nearly every stop. There were coordinated efforts with local authorities and hundreds of approved images captured throughout. In that kind of environment, distinguishing between normal reporting activity and actual security risk becomes a complex issue. That's why some observers see this less as a direct safety concern and more as part of a broader communication strategy. The framing emphasizes risk and urgency, which can shift attention away from how the information was obtained in the first place. At the same time, the background between Prince Harry and the Daily Mail goes back years. It connects to earlier tensions around media practices, coverage disputes, and long-standing disagreements about how stories were sourced and presented. Those concerns aren't without history. Past industry issues have been widely discussed, and some cases led to legal consequences. But the current legal situation being reviewed by Mr. Justice Nicklin focuses on more recent claims and whether specific reporting methods crossed legal boundaries. And this is where things shifted again. Evidence introduced during the case, including an email connected to Charlotte Griffith, raised questions about earlier statements. When documentation appears to conflict with testimony, it becomes a major moment in any legal process. That kind of development doesn't just add detail, it changes direction. It puts more attention on how the case has been presented and whether everything aligns as expected. On the media side, commentary from voices like Sarah Louise Robertson suggests a deeper understanding of how these strategies work. The idea isn't just about one story or one complaint, it's about how communication, branding, and media relationships are carefully managed over time. From that perspective, the situation isn't only about disagreement with coverage. It's about how narratives are shaped, who gets access, and how public perception is guided through both timing and presentation. And as future appearances unfold, especially in more intense media environments, that balance between control and independent reporting will continue to be tested in real time. Just Meghan as a label isn't random, it reflects a calculated branding move. The briefing through The Guardian, the embargo complaint, the way the message is framed, all of it points to a coordinated strategy, not something accidental. At its core, the goal is clear. Protect and grow the brand, because the brand is what drives everything else: the event tickets, the speaking engagements, the product tie-ins, the overall visibility. Positive coverage helps keep that momentum strong, while negative coverage can weaken it. That's where the media strategy comes in. Outlets that are part of the inner circle receive early access and structured information, which helps shape more controlled and consistent coverage. Meanwhile, when coverage from outside that circle turns critical, the response shifts toward reframing the situation, often focusing on how the reporting itself is being handled. This creates a cycle. Favorable coverage builds the brand, while criticism is redirected into a broader narrative that can still maintain support among a core audience. And that core audience becomes incredibly important, because they are the ones most likely to stay engaged, attend events, and support ongoing projects. Data like the Roy Morgan poll highlights how divided public response can be. Not everyone reacts the same way, and that means strategies often focus on maintaining the strongest segment of support rather than trying to shift everyone at once. From a PR perspective, that approach makes sense. Messaging is tailored toward the audience that is already receptive, reinforcing their connection rather than trying to completely change broader opinion overnight. Looking back at the tour coverage, the sequence becomes easier to follow. Reports from outlets like the Daily Mail and Sky News Australia highlighted certain outcomes and observations. The response then shifted toward emphasizing concerns about how that information was handled, which created a new layer of discussion. That shift matters because it moves attention away from the original topic and into a conversation about media dynamics instead. It's not about erasing the initial story, it's about changing what people are focusing on. And despite all of that, the original details don't disappear. Public events, turnout levels, scheduling choices, and audience reactions all remain part of the record. Those elements stay visible regardless of how the narrative evolves afterward. As future appearances approach, especially in environments with even more media attention, the same pattern is likely to be tested again. Different outlets will report in different ways, some working within structured access, others operating independently. And when those two streams of coverage exist side by side, the audience gets to compare them directly. That's where perception is really formed, not just from one version of events, but from how multiple perspectives line up against what people actually see. Her bank balance is clearly benefiting. That's the straightforward commercial reality sitting beneath the humanitarian framing. The hospital visits, the memorial appearances, the veterans events, the refuge stops, All of these moments created powerful images, and those images didn't just stay as images, they fed into listings, and those listings turned into revenue. The emotional context is what gives those visuals their weight. Without it, it's just outfits being promoted on a platform. With it, those same outfits carry a much deeper association, tied to serious and emotional settings. That contrast is what makes the commercial side feel so complex, and for some observers, uncomfortable. Commentary from Sarah Louise Robertson points directly at that shift. The idea is that over time, the structure has evolved from building visibility and connections to actively turning that visibility into income streams. The 2018 tour created the global spotlight, the years after built partnerships and platforms, and now everything appears more organized around monetization. In that setup, Prince Harry still brings institutional weight, but the commercial engine seems to be moving in a direction led more by Meghan Markle. That difference in roles becomes more noticeable during key moments, especially when events are structured around branding and presentation. Some scenes from the tour stood out for that reason. The dynamic on stage, the positioning during events, even moments where Harry appeared less central, all of it added to the perception that the balance has shifted. For many watching, that created a very specific image, one that sparked ongoing discussion. At the same time, there's a deeper layer to it. Harry's past, his military service, the creation of the Invictus Games, and his earlier public role built a strong connection with audiences. Seeing that contrasted with the current structure makes the situation feel more complicated than just a simple business evolution. Looking ahead, the return to Britain will bring everything back into focus again. Major outlets like the Daily Mail, Sky News, and The Guardian will all be covering it from different angles. And all the context from the Australian tour will still be there in the background. Public reactions, event turnout, media coverage, and broader perception, they don't reset, they carry forward. The PR strategy will likely follow the same structure: controlled access, selected briefings, carefully managed visuals. But at the same time, independent reporting will continue alongside it, offering a parallel view of the same events. That's where things really get decided, because when both perspectives are out there, people compare them. They look at what's presented, what's reported, and what they actually see. And that's what makes this next phase so important. The blueprint is already in place, the attention is already building, and the public is already watching closely. If you've been following this story, now's the moment to jump in, drop your thoughts below, share what you think is really going on, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share so more people can join the conversation. Stay tuned, because this isn't slowing down anytime soon, and we'll see you on the next one.